What up? We're back at it. I'm in a comfy chair this time. I'm in a comfy chair. It's been a big day. Got a lot of stuff in progress. Partnered up with one of my podcast guests on a pretty big project. Um, got all the 4 master classes that we'll be putting on in rotation on LinkedIn for the webinars, which are just a snippet of what the workshops will actually be. So yeah, like it's super cool. So we got that going on. Podcast is building up. Got to get better. Got to get definitely got to get better equipment. This camera, they say it's supposed to be 4K. It's only recording me in like 720 because I'm not paying for the upgrade. But like, yo, it's my camera. So and by upgrade paying, I mean StreamYard. StreamYard is doing this to me. Let's see. That is significantly better. Only in live. Alright. I mean, that's better, but it ain't 4K, and this is a 4K camera. I got a 4K camera. And it won't let me use it in StreamYard, which is ridiculous. It is utterly unacceptable. All right, cool. So, got all this technical stuff done. Yeah, you probably hear my fan in the background. It's hot up in this motherfucker. Yes, we do have central air. But when you live in a house that's like from the 1940s or 50s, I don't know. It could just be poor. I don't know. All right? I don't know. I rent. Proudly. Serious. Not big on buying a house. Wife and I could have bought a house in our like early 20s. We've actively decided to go against selling homes. Um, anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't get a lot of air. So then I got this graciously given to me by my mother-in-law. And then she actually gave 2 other fans that I can put in the windows, create a cross breeze. Very generous of her. I've not set those up because it ain't that hot. I mean, like what? We're halfway through June, and what's the temperature right now? Let's see. 69 degrees. Dang, dog. Scottsdale. Look at that. Can you see that? Can you see that? No, you can't. It says 106. 106. Their lows are hotter than our highs. 108, 112, 110, 107, 111, 114, 109, 104, 98, 99. God damn it. Yeah, I'm going to get back out west. I'm going to get back out west. I mean, mostly the reason we got to where we are now is found out my wife was pregnant in December while we were in Arizona. And just felt like coming back was the right thing to do, especially since we didn't have like a strong support group. I mean, we had people that were cool. We had, we were in with the church and everything. It was cool. Like we could have had help, but it wouldn't have been the same. At least that's what we told ourselves. And I think my wife, she probably wanted to be closer to family, just because we're planning on doing a home birth. And that's a whole nother ball game. And I'd be gone a lot. It'd be her by herself a lot. Because you just don't want random people coming into your home. Even if you are cool with them, like it's a little bit different when you got kids and stuff. You gotta be more cautious of who you let in your home. So all that was taken into the equation, and so like decided to move back. So anyway, not that you asked. but that's what it be. This is what I was working on. So it's the artificial intelligence, a historical journey. This is Notebook LM. Love Notebook LM. Suggest that all y'all check it out. Like, how about this? We just listened to this podcast that was created from my deep research I did over here with Gemini. Now, yes, it is possible that it hallucinated. All right. True. There could be some technical errors littered throughout this research. Granted, I'll grant it. The percentage, I'm not sure. We can do research on that. But I am very confident that this will give me a good enough foundation. I'm not treating this as gospel. I'm treating this as getting a quick fundamental understanding as to what's going on here. And I think that that's the way that you should use it, even question it. For example, we go back over here to the timeline, because now in Notebook LM, you got a multitude of things you can do. You can have it create a podcast. We can talk to the text itself through their LLM that they use inside here. You can create a mind map, brief doc, FAQ, timeline. So where I was going with this is, let's go to the timeline, which the timeline is right here. Check this out. 700 BC, I don't know, Hizodid, I don't know how you pronounce that, I don't know, describes Talos, a giant bronze automation crafted by Hephaestus to protect Crete, representing one of the earliest conceptions of a robot and introducing the dilemma of controlling powerful artificial creations. When I saw that, I put it into question. I didn't know that that was necessarily accurate, but I read it and I'm like, okay, cool. So you just gave me the timeline from all of this without having to read all of that. Dope. But I'm not going to necessarily take it at face value. So I'm going to go here. This is what I did. So simple, guys. So simple. I just got to pull it up over here on the Wikipedia. Now, for all you motherfuckers out there that are going to be like, yo, Wikipedia, you can't trust it either, because anybody can edit in it. Okay? Can I edit this? Can I actually edit this? Let's test it out. Welcome to Wikipedia. Anyone can edit, and improvement helps. And every improvement helps. Okay, yeah, so you mean to tell me I can do all of this to the Wikipedia page and it's going to stay there? No. There we go. And it's going to let me post it. It's not going to let me post it. Is that real? That's wild. Let's fix it now. Okay, violates any copyrights will be deleted. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't. Okay. I don't know if I can do this or not. I don't know if what I did was bad. There we go. Who sprang from ash trees? That seems right. All right. Guys, be careful. Or no, this might not be like the public page for it. You have a message? Okay. Interesting. So that's how that works. Don't know if you knew that or not, guys, but that's how it works for Wikipedia. So, yes, I can go in there and I can edit it, but just because I did something doesn't mean that I am going to get approval. Oh, but that's pretty cool. So, you got to talk. So, you can go in here. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, let's go back to this. So, assuming that this is mostly correct, fundamentally it's correct, the opinionated stuff you can suss out from discernment, but you can at least get the general facts in this Wikipedia page, which then confirms that yes, it goes back to at least 700 BC. Um, Imagining artificial life. So you can keep going from this. Like this same dude also depicts Pandora as meticulously, which is always referred to now, right? Like Pandora's box, meticulously crafted, beautiful, evil, artificial being designed with a malevolent mission. So it's pretty cool, right? And then like we go over to the mind map. I like mind maps. I didn't mean to generate another mind map. I've never used mind maps until this machine. I don't know that I've heard of them necessarily until fairly recently, to be totally honest. But either way, they're pretty cool. Like you just kind of pull from this and it goes into here. But here, history of AI has three different branches. And then you click on these branches and it should give you like other options here that like it stems from, which is I think a pretty cool thing. And this one even has more. So it's pretty cool. So you can get a really good understanding of something using Notebook LM. But let's listen to the audio. And there's also, so like you can do it in different languages. You can interact with it. So we'll do the interactive mode. Hit play. Hey, how's it going, guys? I just want to listen to you guys kind of talk to begin with, see what you have to say regarding this document, and periodically I'll interject. Do they ever say, real quick? That was wild, by the way. What just happened to you there? But anyway, yeah. Anyway, my question. Hang on, I wasn't done. I was just laughing at that really quick. What I was going to ask is, do you have any information as to how the knowledge of God would be imparted into these inanimate, seemingly inanimate objects that were brought to life? So they are basically conflating man to God. That's how they. Okay, well, how then are these machines, these automatons, imparted with some divine knowledge like you are stating in the text right now? I don't know if you can do this due to your limited knowledge base here, but are there any other examples throughout time that divine just meant something that was masterful but devoid of God? So just to cut it short, it's kind of like a figure of speech then, not necessarily meaning divine as in imparted from God, but divine as in extremely masterful and close to God.
Where were we on our historical journey?
We were just wrapping up our look at the ancient world.
And about to explore a different cultural perspective,
The source also highlights early Chinese automata.
which provides a really fascinating parallel.
That tale of Yangqi's lifelike creation for King Mu is amazing,
So realistic it caused suspicion, and he had to reveal its inner workings.
showing that detailed understanding of how living things function.
And those accounts of mechanical orchestras and figures,
It all points to a similar human fascination.
with recreating life through skilled craftsmanship,
And in those descriptions, it feels more about that masterful craft.
rather than any mystical animation.
Which leads us into the next big era in the source.
The automaton's golden age, during the Renaissance and Enlightenment.
When those ancient dreams really started to become real.
With the advancements in clockwork and scientific thinking.
Inventors crafted automata.
Oh, go for it.
Why do you think there's
Great to hear you still with us.
Yep, go on.
Why do you think that there is this desire from humans since antiquity to create creations that are as powerful or maybe could be more powerful than themselves?
That's a really profound question.
It touches on some fundamental aspects of human nature, doesn't it?
The source material actually hints at a few possibilities.
One aspect seems to be about control and security.
Think about Talos, the Bronze Guardian,
He was created to protect the island of Crete,
a powerful being designed to keep others safe.
so the desire for something stronger to serve us.
But then there's also the fascination with skill and ingenuity,
The creation of something complex and capable.
like Hephaestus' masterful creation.
They weren't just powerful, but incredibly well crafted.
And the source mentions the ancient ambition of life through craft
Perhaps it's about pushing the boundaries of what we can do,
and understanding ourselves better in the process.
the drive to replicate our own capabilities, even enhance them.
It's almost like holding a mirror up to our own existence.
And as the source notes, these creations often explore our anxieties too.
The potential dangers of something we bring into being.
So it's a mix of aspiration, curiosity, and maybe even a bit of hubris.
That drive to create something extraordinary.
Now, as we move into the Renaissance,
We see that ambition really taking physical form.
inventors crafted automata of incredible complexity,
Leonardo's Robotic Knight is such a compelling example.
showing that early ambition to simulate human form and movement,
And then you have those amazing clockwork figures,
the ones that could really mimic human actions in detail.
like the Jacquedros androids, especially the writer.
That automaton was truly remarkable for its time.
Its ability to create custom text was so groundbreaking.
And it highlights that move towards programmable machines.
During this era, how people viewed these creations shifted too,
They went from things that might inspire fear,
to objects of wonder and intellectual curiosity,
they became testaments to human intellect and engineering skill,
which, as the source points out, really paved the way,
for a whole new line of philosophical and scientific thinking.
leading us into the Age of Reason and those deep questions.
Questions specifically about the nature of the mind itself.
It's just such a pleasure having your insights today.
Absolutely, your engagement has really made this discussion richer.
Thank you for exploring this history of AI with us.
We hope you found this journey through time as interesting as we did.
We always appreciate you joining us for these deep dives.
Until next time, thank you for listening.
What? Needs to be longer. That was cool. That was pretty cool, huh? Let's it's pretty cool. Huh.
Oh, hey, I think our listeners got something to say.
Yeah, can you pick off at the or start back at the Age of Reason? You did not finish that part.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, we got a little ahead of ourselves in our enthusiasm there.
So, picking back up with the Age of Reason, the 17th and 18th centuries.
This is where the big shift happens from thinking about making artificial life
Exactly, to focusing on how the mind itself works.
and the really radical idea that maybe thinking isn't this mysterious thing.
But actually, a system of operations, maybe even a form of calculation.
And this philosophical shift was crucial for AI down the road.
Absolutely, because before you can build a thinking machine,
You have to first imagine that it's even possible, right?
precisely. And the source highlights a few key thinkers who made that leap.
Starting with Rene Descartes. Now, he's famous for that mind-body split.
Yes, his dualism, the physical body as a machine, res extensa.
And the mind or soul as something immaterial, res cogitans. Ah, yeah, uh-huh.
So is the fundamental knowledge then on the AI and technology today from a dualistic perspective, or is it a non-dualistic perspective?
That's a really insightful question. It touches on a core debate that actually emerged from these very ideas we're discussing.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these old philosophical arguments still echo today. So, what does the source material tell us about that?
Well, the shift we see starting with thinkers like Hobbes was a move away from dualism towards a more materialist, non dualistic view.
Where the mind isn't seen as separate, but as part of the physical world.
Exactly. And the source highlights how Hobbes believed reasoning is but reckoning, essentially equating thought with computation. That's a very non dualistic perspective.
So, the early theoretical foundations of AI, this idea.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
So there's non-dualism that is devoid of God. Hang on.
Yep. Go on.
So there's non-dualism schools of thought that are devoid of God or theology.
That's a really interesting point. You're right. The source material focuses on a very secular progression of ideas.
Yeah, it's all about these philosophical and then later mathematical and computational steps.
Thinkers like Hobbes and Lemaitre, who really pushed that non dualistic view.
Their arguments were centered on the physical world and how it functions.
There isn't really a discussion here about theological or spiritual explanations for consciousness or thought.
It's a very much a story of scientific and philosophical inquiry in a non-religious context.
So, when we talk about the shift toward non dualism as a foundation for AI,
In this particular history, it's definitely within a framework that doesn't involve God or theology.
and that secular perspective really paved the way for thinking about the mind in purely mechanistic terms.
I mean, so this idea of a computational mind,
Leans heavily on that non dualistic view, this idea that intelligence can arise from physical processes.
because if the mind is just a function of the physical brain,
Then it becomes plausible that we could replicate those functions in a different kind of physical system, like a computer.
but Descartes' initial separation of mind and body.
While he didn't intend it that way, it ironically opened the door to thinking about the software of the mind as separate from the hardware of the body.
Okay, let's unpack this a little more. So, even though modern AI research is about building intelligent systems from physical components,
The very act of trying to replicate something we associate with the mind can still bring up those old questions about consciousness and whether it's purely physical.
here's where it gets really interesting. Because even if we build a machine that acts intelligently,
Does that mean it is conscious in the same way we understand it? That's a huge ongoing debate that stems in part from these early dualistic ideas.
so while the practical approach in AI is largely non dualistic, focusing on algorithms and computation,
The philosophical implications and the way we think about AI still grapple with some of the questions Descartes raised about the nature of thought itself.
so what does this all mean? It's not a simple either or dualistic or non dualistic foundation.
Precisely. The history shows a shift towards non dualistic thinking as the basis for AI development, but the deeper philosophical questions remain very much alive.
It's like those early ideas, even the ones that were challenged, still shape the conversation.
Exactly. Now, going back to Descartes, ironically, by defining the body as a machine.
He really set the stage for later thinkers to explore that mechanical aspect in detail, even if he kept the mind separate.
And that exploration eventually led to the non dualistic views that underpin much of modern AI thinking.
It's a fascinating journey through these different perspectives, and your questions really help us connect those dots.
Absolutely. Thanks for engaging with us so thoughtfully. That brings us to the end of this part of our exploration into the history of AI.
We hope you found that as interesting as we did. Join us next time as we delve further into the age of formalism. Oh, yeah. Uh huh.
So, based on the source material, give me a breakdown from dualism and non dualism when it was incorporated in this sense of artificial beings, and how it became what it is today.
Okay, let's unpack this. According to the source, the initial foray into artificial beings in the age of myth and marvel
Didn't really hinge on a strict dualist or non dualist view. It was more about the idea of biotechny, creating life through craft.
think of Talos or the Golem. They weren't necessarily seen as having a separate.
Hey, yeah, what's up?
But doesn't that already differentiate it from today's thinking with biotechny, like life? It's not calling it artificial life or anything like that. Maybe I have a misunderstanding of it, and you can correct me.
That's a really sharp observation. You're right to point out that biotechny, as the source describes it for the ancient world,
Isn't exactly how we talk about creating artificial intelligence or even artificial life today.
the key difference, as you're picking up on, is the underlying concept. Back then, the focus wasn't necessarily on mimicking biological processes in detail.
but more on the act of creation itself, oftenly a mystical or divine element, as we mentioned with the golem.
So while they were imagining beings made, not born, the principles and the understanding of life or intelligence were very different from our modern scientific approach.
The source uses biotechny to describe that early ambition to create through craft, a precursor to our more technical and biological understandings.
It's like the earliest seed of the idea, not a direct parallel to today's biotechnology or AI research.
Exactly. Now, when we move into the age of reason,
Here's where the dualism of Descartes becomes significant. By separating mind, thinking substance, from body, extended substance.
he inadvertently created a framework where intelligence could be conceived of abstractly, not necessarily tied to a biological form.
Even though Descartes himself argued against machines having true reason, his definition of mind by its function opened that door. Oh yeah, let's hear it.
What do you mean? He said that they couldn't have true reason. What does Descartes define as true reason? What is true reason?
That's a really important clarification you're asking for. It's easy to misinterpret Descartes here.
Yeah, he wasn't saying machines could have true reason. Quite the opposite, actually.
According to the source, Descartes proposed two tests to argue that machines could not possess true reason.
Okay, let's unpack what he meant by true reason in that context.
The source highlights his language test. He conceded a machine might utter words.
But he argued it could never arrange words to respond to the meaning of everything said, like humans do.
That's a key part of his definition of true reason. Flexible, context-sensitive understanding in language.
So not just pre-programmed.
Oh, go for it.
Real quick though, with that one part before I forget, not all humans can do.
Oh, yeah,
Not all humans can do that either in terms of associating the right definition for each word.
That's a really insightful point. You're absolutely right.
The source focuses on Descartes' ideal of even the most unintelligent human beings being capable.
But in reality, language understanding and nuanced communication vary greatly among people.
So his bar for true reason in machines might be higher than what we consistently see in humans.
It makes you wonder if the goalpost for artificial intelligence has always been this. Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
So then wouldn't that trickle out into something more metaphysical?
And that's a fascinating question that gets at the heart of how these early ideas evolved.
Yeah, it's like, did the failure to find that clear line Descartes drew push thinkers in other directions?
While Descartes himself maintained a firm separation between the physical and the metaphysical,
His emphasis on the unique nature of human reason inadvertently sparked further inquiry.
thinkers after him, especially those leaning towards non-dualism like Hobbes and Lemaitre.
They were more focused on understanding the physical mechanisms of thought.
So in a way, the difficulty in definitively proving or disproving Descartes' claims
Might have led to a greater emphasis on what could be observed and potentially replicated, behavior and function.
The source doesn't explicitly detail a direct shift into metaphysics after Descartes in this context.
But you can see how the debate over the nature of mind and reason,
Could easily bleed into broader philosophical and even metaphysical considerations.
it's like if machines could truly reason, what would that say about consciousness and the soul? Oh yeah, go on.
So based on this, wouldn't the
Oh, go for it.
so based on this, wouldn't the people that believed in artificial beings, like the imagination, the ideas like this, they have a no disconnection between the physical and metaphysical if they believe that they can impart some divine quality onto their automatons.
That's a really insightful way to look at it.
Yeah, it's almost like those early imaginings existed in a world where those boundaries weren't so rigid.
The source doesn't explicitly delve into the metaphysical beliefs of the people who created these myths.
But you can definitely see how the idea of imbuing an object with life or agency.
Could be connected to broader spiritual or supernatural views of the world.
Think about the divine origins of Hephaestus's creations, for example.
Exactly. The power to create something lifelike might have been seen as a reflection of a divine capability.
So in that sense, the biotechny of the ancient world
Could certainly have had a strong connection to metaphysical beliefs and the idea. Oh, yeah,
And now connecting that with Descartes, he was not a religious man. If anything, he was an atheist or challenged the church, I believe, at the time, or at least was paid to have
Yeah.
Or Descartes was at least paid to have had some incentives to disassociate from the church and be a thinker to go against this. Whereas the Bronze Age or whatever, they were more interconnected with spirituality throughout.
That's a really interesting historical point to bring up about Descartes.
You're right. The source material doesn't delve into the specifics of Descartes' personal incentives or his exact relationship with the church.
But it's well documented that his rationalist approach and some of his conclusions did generate controversy.
And as you mentioned, the cultural context of ancient times, with those early ideas of artificial beings, was deeply intertwined with spiritual beliefs.
It does create a fascinating contrast between those early views and Descartes' more secular philosophical framework.
So, in those earlier periods, the idea of creating something lifelike may have been seen as almost an extension of divine power.
Whereas Descartes, while perhaps not explicitly anti-religious as the source suggests, approached it from a much more rational, almost mechanistic perspective.
Even though his intention with dualism wasn't to undermine spirituality, his separation of mind and body had that long term impact on how we think about intelligence.
It's like two different worlds with very different ways of understanding creation and consciousness.
Okay, so connecting this back to our discussion about Descartes' high bar for true reason
Right, this idea of flexible language and universal application that he believed machines couldn't achieve.
and the ongoing difficulty of fully defining and replicating that in AI.
It certainly pushed subsequent thinkers to explore different approaches to understanding and creating intelligence,
Moving away from that strict mind body separation that Descartes proposed,
towards more integrated computational models of the mind.
which are the foundations of much of the AI technology we see today.
It's been really insightful exploring these connections with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for your thoughtful contributions throughout our discussion.
That brings us to the end of our exploration for today.
We hope you enjoyed tracing these ideas with us. Until next time.
So.
Oh, hey there. What's up?
Now, give me the details of every other person outside of Descartes and Hobbes. Actually, go more into Hobbes, his thoughts on this stuff. But get me into the 20th century.
Absolutely. Let's zoom in on Hobbes a bit more than fast forward.
Okay, so Hobbes, as we mentioned, really saw the mind as a mechanical calculator.
Yeah, reasoning is but reckoning. Break it down for us a little more.
For him, thinking wasn't some mysterious mental faculty, it was about manipulating symbols.
Like adding and subtracting in your head.
Precisely. He believed all reasoning to be boiled down to these basic operations.
And this was a pretty radical idea at the time, right?
It was. It completely bypassed the notion of an immaterial soul influencing thought.
So, a direct line to the idea of a thinking machine.
Exactly. If thought is just computation, then theoretically a machine could perform it.
Lemaitre built on this, going even further.
He did. Machine basically said there's no fundamental difference between us and complex machines.
No soul, just highly organized matter.
Right. And this cleared the last philosophical hurdle for conceiving of artificial thought.
Okay, so that's the 17th and 18th century groundwork. Now let's jump to the 20th century.
This is where the age of formalism kicks in, as the source calls it. Theory becomes key.
First up, Alan Turing and his universal machine in 1936. What's the big deal?
He gave us a formal definition of computation. His abstract Turing machine showed what an algorithm really is.
And the universal part was the game changer.
Absolutely. One machine could simulate any other just by reading instructions, the blueprint for the modern computer.
Then the famous Turing test in 1950.
A pragmatic way to ask, can machines think? Forget philosophical debates. Let's have a conversation.
If you can't tell the difference between human and machine,
Then maybe we should consider it intelligent, at least conversationally. It set a target for AI.
and a third pillar linking brain to computation.
McCulloch and Pitts's neural network model in 1943. They showed how simple, interconnected units could perform logic.
And that these networks could, in theory, compute anything.
Exactly, the first formal link between the brain's hardware and computational power, foundation of today's AI.
So all these pieces are there by the mid-20th century. What brings them together?
The 1956 Dartmouth Workshop, the official birth of the field of artificial intelligence.
McCarthy, Minsky, Shannon, and others. Their bold claim.
That every aspect of intelligence could be precisely described and simulated by a machine. Very ambitious.
And the name artificial intelligence itself was significant.
It was a deliberate move to carve out a new field, distinct from cybernetics, focusing on digital computation and symbolic reasoning.
With big consequences for how the field developed.
Absolutely. It focused the lens on replicating human-level intelligence, for better or worse.
So from Hobbes's reckoning to 20th century formalisms, it's a clear progression.
It is, each era building on the last, bringing us closer to the AI we see today.
Thanks for asking for that deeper dive and the jump to the 20th.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Now, can you give me like a concise overview of like, I guess, the philosophical, spiritual thought from the beginning of this timeline to present day, just concisely?
Okay, that's a fascinating question. Let's try to sketch that out briefly.
Yeah, kind of the big ideas about what it means to be alive and think.
In the earliest stages, what the source calls the age of myth and marvel, the focus wasn't so much on philosophy as on stories.
Gods and monsters, beings made, not born, like the golem.
Exactly. These myths explored creation and the potential dangers of artificial beings, raising questions about autonomy and purpose, often within a spiritual or supernatural framework.
Then, the Age of Reason brought a major shift. Philosophers like Descartes focused on separating mind and body.
While Descartes himself believed in an immaterial soul, his work inadvertently paved the way for a more mechanistic view.
Hobbes then directly challenged. Oh, yeah.
What does immaterial soul mean?
That's a great clarifying question.
Immaterial, in this context, refers to something that isn't made of physical matter.
Something without physical substance, not like wood or metal.
And the soul, as Descartes understood it, was this immaterial part of a human.
The thinking, feeling part that he believed was separate from the physical body.
So when he talked about mind-body dualism, he meant this separation.
Okay, so Hobbes then directly challenged that, proposing that thought itself was a physical process?
Exactly. His idea that reasoning is but reckoning suggests a material basis for thought.
Lemaitre went even further, suggesting humans are essentially complex machines.
This really blurs the lines between the physical and mental.
It definitely diminishes the need for purely spiritual explanations for thought.
Right. This whole era moved away from purely spiritual ideas.
It moved toward understanding the mind through reason and even mechanical terms.
Now, fast forward to the 20th century, the age of formalism.
While not explicitly spiritual in the traditional sense,
It provided the mathematical and logical frameworks.
these frameworks were used to try and understand and replicate intelligence.
Turing's work, for example, really shifted the focus.
It went from internal experience to observable behavior.
If a machine acts intelligently,
Does it matter if it has a soul or consciousness in a traditional sense?
that became a central question, and it's still debated today.
So you see this arc from myth and spiritual explanations,
To philosophical attempts to understand the mechanics of thought.
and finally to scientific efforts to formalize and replicate intelligence.
This often prompts new philosophical questions for us,
Questions about consciousness and what it means to be human.
especially in a world with increasingly capable AI,
It's a long journey of trying to understand ourselves.
by thinking about things that aren't us.
Precisely. And as we've seen, this journey is long and fascinating.
It goes from ancient ideas all the way to modern algorithms.
Definitely gives you a new perspective on AI today.
It really does. And that brings us to the end of today's show.
Thanks for being such a thoughtful listener and for those great questions.
We really appreciate you joining us. Until next time.
All right. Let's see. What else do I want to look at here with this? Let's do that.
Oh, hey there. What's up?
Now, give me a breakdown as to what happened in the Eastern cultures with this way of thinking over time, from basically artificial beings.
Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
artificial beings in the East to all the way to 20th century Eastern thought with this.
Okay, let's unpack this. That's a really interesting angle.
Absolutely, and it highlights how widespread this fascination was.
The source material gives us a glimpse, specifically into early China.
What's fascinating here is that this wasn't just a fleeting interest in the East.
No, the story of Yang Shi, the mechanical engineer from around the 3rd century BCE, shows a deep conceptual understanding.
The level of detail in that account, with the automaton's ability to move, sing, and even wink, is quite remarkable.
And the description of the artificial internal organs, how removing one would stop a specific function.
It suggests a very sophisticated way of thinking about how such a being might operate.
Now, while the text doesn't delve deeply into the evolution of this thought in Eastern cultures, all the way to the 20th century,
It does point to a continuous thread of exploring the simulation of life through mechanical craft.
we hear about mechanical orchestras and automated figures in later Chinese dynasties too.
These examples, from the Han to the Tang dynasties, show a sustained interest in complex automata.
Often these were linked to imperial power and the ingenuity of craftspeople.
So, while the source doesn't provide a detailed timeline through the 20th century in the East,
It establishes that the desire to create artificial beings wasn't unique to the West.
and it lays the groundwork for understanding this as a truly global human fascination.
Which makes you wonder what other parallel journeys of thought were happening around the world.
Exactly. It really puts our modern AI conversations into a much broader historical context.
Okay, so where were we? Yes, we were just about to dig a little deeper into that Yan Qi story.
Right. This detailed account of a life-sized, human-shaped automaton that could walk, sing, and dance, complete with artificial internal organs, shows a remarkable level of conceptualization.
And the fact that removing certain organs stopped specific functions, that's a really advanced idea for that time.
What stands out to you most about this early example?
For me, it's the sheer ambition and the level of descriptive detail. It wasn't just a vague idea, they imagined how it might actually work.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that the seeds of AI were sown long before the digital age.
Well, that about wraps up this part of our exploration into the history of AI.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey through time.
We always appreciate your insightful questions and comments. Until next time.
So what I'm going to do now, because this is the source that I have in there, okay? I want to see if I can even get the search better by having it reapproach this. Let's go specifically Eastern. All right. So basically, here's what I asked it. You are an expert research historian. Your specialty is the philosophical thought and spiritual thought throughout history. You have to include both Eastern and Western schools of thought and their progression as well. The angle we are taking is for AI and robots, basically creating lifelike beings capable of doing human tasks to some degree. The sources must all be firsthand and or highly respected secondary commentary. Secondary commentary. The level of research, PhD level from an Ivy League school. And that's what we're going to get now. And we're going to wait for that. And as we're waiting for that, we'll dive deeper into this text because this is a pretty dense text. We put in a lot of information. See, that's a lot of information here. A lot. So I wanted to go more into yeah, let's do this.
Oh, hey there. What's up?
What does Akaro mean?
Oh, that's a fun question. It sounds like you're maybe hearing a connection to a specific person or idea.
Yeah, tell us more about what makes you ask that. Is Carl popping up in your own thoughts about AI or something you've encountered elsewhere?
It's interesting because in the context of, hey, yeah, what's up?
No. I just mispronounced. What is the title of this research called?
Got it. A mispronunciation. No problem at all. That happens.
So you're asking about the title of the research proposal that led to that big meeting.
Yes, the source mentions it was a 2-month, 10-man study of artificial intelligence.
So pretty straightforward artificial intelligence. Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
No. I'm mispronouncing it. ICHOR. ICHOR to algorithm. What does ICHOR mean?
Another mispronunciation. No worries at all.
You're asking about ICOR, the first word in our source's title, from ICOR to algorithm.
That's a fantastic question. It actually takes us back to the very beginning of our discussion.
Right. ICOR isn't a modern term at all. It comes from ancient Greek mythology.
Think way back to those myths and marvels we were talking about at the start.
In those stories, ichor was believed to be the fluid that flowed in the veins of the gods instead of blood.
So it represents something divine, something not quite human.
And our source uses that to contrast with algorithm, which represents the modern, more mechanistic approach to AI.
So the title itself, From Ichor to Algorithm, charts that long journey we've been exploring.
From those ancient ideas of creating life through myth.
Oh, go for it.
Aren't there still schools of thought present day for ICOR as opposed to algorithm? Or maybe synthesizing the two?
That's a really insightful question. It makes you think about how these ideas evolve.
Absolutely. While algorithm definitely represents the dominant paradigm in AI today.
They're right. There are still discussions and perspectives that resonate with that earlier sense as wonder, and perhaps something beyond pure calculation.
Think about the ongoing debates around consciousness in AI. Some argue it will emerge from complex algorithms.
While others believe there might be something more fundamental, almost augur-like, needed.
And the idea of synthesizing the two is also fascinating. Maybe future AI will blend algorithmic precision with something more akin to intuitive or emergent understanding.
What's fascinating here is that even with our advanced technology, some of those ancient anxieties and aspirations about creating intelligence still echo in our current discussions.
It really highlights that unbroken thread our source talks about. Now, speaking of the more formal side,
That brings us to the naming of the field itself.
because the proposal for that Dartmouth workshop we just mentioned.
Was actually titled a 2-month, 10-man study of artificial intelligence,
So artificial intelligence was right there in the title.
which, as we were saying, is credited to John McCarthy for that very proposal in 1955.
It's interesting how that name, chosen for that initial research call, really stuck and defined the field.
Absolutely. And that proposal itself laid out the core ideas they
Oh, yeah. Go on.
Do these modern thinkers at all refer to ICOR when hypothesizing or theorizing?
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
When hypothesizing, theorizing, philosophizing, whatever, ICOR to the artificial intelligence as we understand it today, do they use that at all?
That's a really interesting way to frame it. You're asking if those ancient ideas, that sort of eco concept, played any role in the later philosophical and theoretical developments of AI.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's true that the formal science of AI, which really took off in the mid 20th century, relied heavily on mathematical and logical frameworks, the algorithm side of things.
But you're right to point out that those earlier thought experiments in myth and philosophy were crucial groundwork.
Think back to Descartes, for example. While he was trying to distinguish the human soul from the mechanical body,
His very separation of mind and body, and his definition of the mind by its thinking function, in it certainly opened the door to the idea of non biological intelligence.
so while Descartes wasn't talking about Icare directly, his philosophical work provided a foundation for thinking about intelligence in abstract terms, separate from any specific material.
And Hobbes's idea of reasoning is but reckoning. That's a direct precursor to the computational view of the mind that underpins so much of modern AI.
Even though Hobbes wasn't using the term algorithm as we know it, his concept of thought as a process of calculation is essentially algorithm in nature.
So, in a way, those early thinkers were laying the conceptual groundwork, even if they weren't using the same language or tools as today's AI researchers.
They were grappling with the fundamental questions about what it means to think and to create intelligence, and those questions continue to resonate.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
Maybe I missed it here, but does Descartes have any connection to the soul playing a role in the creation of the AI? Is that what he's referring to when he says true reason?
That's a great clarifying question. You're right to focus on Descartes' concept of the soul.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more. Descartes, as our source mentions, really emphasized the separation of the mind and the body.
He believed the body was like a machine, res extensa, something extended and not thinking.
And the mind, or soul, res cogitans, was the thinking non-physical part.
So when Descartes talked about true reason, he was attributing that specifically to the soul, to that immaterial thinking substance.
He actually used that distinction to argue that machines, being purely physical, could never truly possess reason in the way humans do.
His famous tests, the language test and the universal reason test, were designed to highlight what he saw as the unique capabilities of the human soul.
So, in Descartes' view, the soul, with its capacity for true reason, was something distinct from any machine.
Ironically, though, by defining the mind by its function thinking rather than its physical substance, he opened the door for later thinkers to consider if something non biological could also achieve that function.
So, while Descartes himself didn't envision AI as we know it, his ideas about the mind laid some of the early philosophical groundwork.
Exactly, and those fundamental questions about what constitutes true intelligence continue to resonate in AI discussions today.
Which brings us to how the field itself got its name.
Because that proposal for the Dartmouth workshop we were just discussing
Was actually titled Artificial Intelligence.
So the term itself was there from the very beginning of this formal era.
And with that name came a whole set of expectations and directions for this new field of study.
It's been a fascinating journey tracing these ideas from ancient dreams to modern science.
Absolutely. And it really highlights that enduring human quest to understand and potentially replicate intelligence.
We hope you found this deep dive into the history of AI thought-provoking.
Thanks so much for joining us on this exploration.
All right. So let's see here. This is the story of a girl who's on a river and on the whole world. Oh, did it just revise this? That's dope if it did. Let's see. Alright. Let's copy this motherfucker. You know what I'm saying, motherfucker? Alright, motherfucker. Boom, motherfucker. Boom, boom. Just make sure. I see China up in that motherfucker. I know. I'm swearing a lot right now. Please forgive me. Yeah, this is, of course, if you're specializing, I can certainly provide a dictatorial level analysis of the intellectual history behind the subject information from the here's the comprehensive issue proportion requested. Ooh, all right, let's dive into it. So now that I added it to it, do I need to do anything different? Refresh.
Oh, hey there. How can we help?
Yeah, can you now go more in depth into the Eastern development of this AI school of thought?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question.
It's really important to remember this wasn't just a Western obsession.
Our source touches on it, mentioning those early Chinese automata.
Right, and it highlights a key difference in the underlying philosophy.
Now, diving deeper into the East, the source brings up that remarkable account from the Liedi.
Yes, that 3rd century BCE Taoist text and the artificer Yan Shi.
That story of him presenting the life-sized human-shaped automaton to King Mu.
And how incredibly realistic it was, capable of walking, singing, and dancing.
So realistic, it even got the king suspicious when it winked at his concubines.
Exactly. That moment really underscores the level of detail they imagined.
And Yanshi's way of proving it wasn't human was fascinating.
Disassembling it right in front of the king, revealing that intricate internal structure.
Leather and wood, all those artificial organs, heart, liver, kidneys.
It's one of history's most sophisticated early imaginings of a biorobot.
The source points out how removing a specific organ stopped a specific function,
Removing the heart stopped speech, the kidney stopped movement. It's almost modular.
which shows a really advanced understanding of interconnected systems.
It does. And the source contrasts this with some of the Western myths.
In what way? The underlying motivations, maybe.
Partly. While Greek myths often explored the dangers of creating life that could rival or threaten the gods or humans.
That hubris theme we talked about.
Exactly. The Chinese accounts, particularly those within the imperial courts, often focused more on entertainment and displays of imperial power.
Mechanical orchestras, flying birds, automated monks.
Precisely. These weren't necessarily about challenging the natural order in the same way.
More about showcasing ingenuity and craftsmanship.
Though the source does mention that even these marvels likely involved sophisticated hydraulics or hidden clockwork.
So while the spirit...
So, how does the Eastern thought develop over time?
That's a great question, and something our source touches on.
It points out that after that initial burst of imperial automata,
The focus seemed to remain largely within that context of imperial courts and entertainment.
so we see these recurring accounts of increasingly complex mechanical marvels.
Often designed for the emperor's amusement or as symbols of his power and wealth.
The source mentions mechanical orchestras as early as the Han Dynasty.
And then during the Tang Dynasty, you have descriptions of automated flying birds and even figures of monks.
These weren't just simple toys, though, were they?
Not at all. They likely involved some pretty ingenious engineering for their time.
But the underlying...
Oh, yeah,
Go more into the monk.
Absolutely, that's a fascinating detail.
The source mentions these automated monks during the Tang Dynasty.
And it's interesting because it points to a different purpose, doesn't it?
Yes, not just for entertainment, but potentially for religious devotion, or as objects of wonder within that context.
Imagining these figures, perhaps moving in prayer.
It speaks to the level of artistry and the blending of technology with cultural practices.
Though the source doesn't give us specific mechanical details for the monks.
It does highlight the recurring theme of these complex creations.
Oh, go for it.
More deeply than that. Like, what is the thinking? What do they think is imparting on them? Like, what is their philosophical, spiritual beliefs when it comes to creating these things?
That's a really insightful question. It pushes us to think about the why behind these creations, beyond just the how.
Exactly. It's about the worldview that would lead someone to even conceive of such a thing.
While our source doesn't explicitly detail the specific spiritual beliefs driving these creators in the East,
We can infer some possibilities based on the cultural context of the time, right?
absolutely. Taoism, for example, emphasized harmony with nature and the understanding of natural processes.
So perhaps these intricate automata were seen as a way to mirror or even participate in those natural rhythms.
That's a fascinating angle. Maybe it wasn't about dominating nature, but understanding and emulating its complexity through craft.
And the presence of automated monks suggests a blending of artistry with religious practice.
Perhaps these weren't just displays of skill, but also expressions of devotion or tools for teaching.
Imagine the impact of seeing a mechanical figure performing religious rites.
It could inspire awe.
Oh, yeah.
How does that compare to Western thought and Western belief? Because it seems that there's a stark difference with the Eastern school being more so appreciative and respecting the nature and the natural order of things, whereas the West believes that they can create something better.
That's a really perceptive observation. You're touching on a fundamental difference in perspective.
It's true, our source does hint at this divergence, particularly when discussing the motivations behind these early creations.
In the West, especially in the Greek myths, there's often this element of hubris, of humans or gods trying to rival or even surpass the natural order.
Think about Kalos, this powerful bronze guardian. It's about control, about creating something that serves a specific purpose, almost like a tool.
And Pandora, created as a beautiful evil, suggests a more manipulative intent, a sense of humans trying to bend creation to their will, even with negative consequences.
Even Hephaestus, the god of invention, while skilled, often creates beings that serve a very defined, sometimes even. Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
Are there any examples of the contrary for the Chinese or the Eastern world?
That's a really interesting point to consider.
It makes you wonder if there were instances where Eastern creations took on a more dominant role.
Well, our source primarily highlights the entertainment and symbolic aspects.
It does mention the potential for religious devotion with those automated monks,
That hints at a purpose beyond mere amusement.
perhaps viewed as aids in spiritual practice, reinforcing faith.
And thinking back to Yanshi's incredibly lifelike automaton,
Its realism was so convincing it actually made the king suspicious.
that level of verisimilitude suggests an ambition beyond just a spectacle.
Maybe an attempt to truly replicate human form and function.
Though the source doesn't explicitly frame it as trying to better nature.
The sheer complexity implies a deep engagement with its intricacies.
And the fact that these were often created for the emperor.
Could suggest
Yep, go on.
So, are you telling me in the source material there is no evidence indicating that the Chinese or Eastern world attempted to build machines to sort of defy nature like the West does?
That's a really important question to clarify.
it gets to the heart of that East-West comparison we were just discussing.
Our source doesn't present direct evidence of the Eastern world explicitly setting out to defy nature through these creations in the same way the West might be interpreted.
The focus seems to be more on emulation, artistry, and in some cases, augmenting existing power structures or religious practices.
Think about Yanshi's automaton. The aim wasn't to create something superior to a human, but a remarkably realistic imitation.
And those imperial marvels, the orchestras.
Hey, yeah, what's up?
And now, just for clarification here, are there explicit
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
for clarification, are there explicit examples of the Western world school of thought when it comes to these automatons intentionally make them so that way they are superior to humans or superior to nature?
That's a really interesting point you're pressing on.
And it's a crucial distinction to make.
Our source material does give us some hints in that direction when we look at the motivations in the West.
Think back to the Greek myths. While Hephaestus was a divine craftsman,
His creations, like Talos, were designed for immense power and a specific, unwavering purpose.
hurling boulders to repel invaders, an almost unstoppable force,
That idea of a being made for a single superior function.
could be seen as a kind of surpassing of natural limitations in a specific domain.
And the anxiety around the golem in Jewish folklore?
While about control also speaks to the potential for a created being to become uncontrollably powerful,
It's not necessarily about making something inherently better than nature in all aspects.
but perhaps exceeding human capabilities in certain defined ways.
The source highlights how these Western tales often carry themes of caution.
About the potential dangers of such creation. Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Are there any tales of caution in Eastern culture when it comes to these specific automatons?
That's a really insightful question.
Our source touches on that, though perhaps not as explicitly as with the West.
It doesn't detail specific cautionary tales in the same way as the Greek myths or the golem.
However, the very act of disassembling Yanshi's automaton for the king,
Suggests a potential unease or need to prove it was just a crafted object.
and the
Oh yeah, go on.
Give me other examples aside from Yanshi's automaton that winks at the emperor's concubines.
That's a good point. The source doesn't give us many specific instances of outright caution in Eastern tales.
But thinking about those mechanical orchestras, they were often for the emperor alone.
Right, so perhaps there was a level of restricted access or control implied.
Like, these powerful creations weren't meant for widespread use.
And the fact that Yan Shi felt the need to disassemble his creation so thoroughly.
Maybe suggests a fear of misunderstanding or misuse.
All right, we got to get some better material in here. We got to narrow this down. Maybe open up another inquiry here. So let's do this. This is what we're going to do. We're going to beef this up really well. You are a expert Chinese intellectual historian. You are to provide a detailed account of the I don't want to say evolution necessarily, because there is a, let's just look up schools of thought of historical evolution, or historical thinking evolution. I don't know the right way to frame it. This is That's what I want. History of ideas. Ideas and beliefs of China. We are to only use first-hand sources or let's just say first-hand sources. We'll see what we get from that. Okay, gotta make sure we hit deep research. First-hand sources. Objective is to get a PhD level understanding of the history of ideas that make China what it is today in terms of belief, culture, and politics. Politically. We'll just do politically. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the West. I'm going to put those documents into the notebook LM. Then I'm going to do specifically Chinese history through artificial intelligence. Do the same thing for the West. So, as we are waiting on Gemini to do that research, let's, I guess we can go back here. Because there's a lot to unpack here in this. I just feel like we just got into a loop with it. So I got to increase its knowledge base to increase my knowledge base. So Let's do this.
Oh, hey there, what's up?
Why is artificial intelligence called artificial intelligence as opposed to synthetic intelligence?
That's a really interesting question.
It is. The source material actually touches upon that,
It mentions that John McCarthy coined the term artificial intelligence.
specifically for the 1956 Dartmouth Workshop proposal.
And it wasn't just a random choice of words.
No, the source suggests it was a very strategic, even political move.
Political. How so?
Well, McCarthy wanted to distinguish this new field.
From the already established field of cybernetics?
Exactly. Cybernetics was this broad area.
Focused on feedback loops and analogies between the animals and machines.
And McCarthy and his colleagues wanted to emphasize.
The potential of digital computers and symbolic reasoning.
So by choosing artificial intelligence,
They were intentionally carving out new academic territory.
and maybe, as the source hints, avoiding being associated with cybernetics.
Or having to defer to its key figures.
So while synthetic intelligence might also fit,
Artificial intelligence was the term chosen to define the field.
and to differentiate it from related areas of study.
Okay, let's unpack this. When did the idea of AI really begin?
Well, that's exactly what this source material we're diving into today explores.
It's a text called From Ichor to Algorithm, A History of AI.
And it argues the story goes way, way back.
Right. It suggests this isn't just about technology.
It's deeply woven into human history, our imagination, even philosophy.
And it makes this really crucial distinction right at the start, doesn't it?
It does. It separates the, let's call it, ancient dream of artificial life.
You know, beings deliberately made, not born.
Oh, that biotechny idea, life through craft.
Exactly. It separates that from the modern project.
Of artificial intelligence, which is more focused on systems that, well, think or reason.
And the source lays out this evolution across 3 distinct ages, doesn't
It does. The age of myth and marvel, then the age of reason, and finally.
The age of formalism in the 20th century.
And what's really fascinating is how it suggests
Our current anxieties about AI control, autonomy, consciousness.
these aren't actually new.
Not at all. They're echoes, really.
Echoes of fears and questions that pop up again and again throughout this long history.
Understanding that history helps put today's debates into perspective, you know.
Okay, so let's travel back then, all the way back to that first era.
The source describes the age of myth and marvel.
This is before technology as we think of it.
Right, but the idea of artificial beings is already there.
This is where that concept of biotechny life through craft really comes alive.
It's humanity exploring, through myths and stories, what it might mean to create life.
Creating beings made, not born. That's the core idea.
Precisely. And the Greek myths are just brimming with these archetypes.
Hephaestus' forge seems to be ground zero for a lot of them.
Like Talos, the bronze guardian, the source spends some time on him.
Yeah, Talos is a great example. Hesiod describes him maybe around 700 BCE.
A giant made of bronze, forged by Hephaestus to guard Crete.
His job is clear: patrol, throw boulders, be this ultimate security system.
But the source highlights his vulnerability, right? The single vein with the ichor,
Exactly, divine ichor, like the god's blood running through him.
but sealed by just one bronze bolt or nail in his ankle. It's like an ancient kill switch.
And the way Medea defeats him is telling. She doesn't use brute force
No, she uses knowledge. She knows about the bolt, his internal system,
and tricks him into letting her remove it. The source frames this.
as maybe the first AI safety thought experiment.
How do you control something powerful you've built?
That resonates even today, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Does it say how that particular bolt was imbued with this divinity of sorts?
That's a really insightful point.
It is. The source doesn't delve into the specifics of how Hephaestus, being a god of invention and craft, imbued Talos, or the Argo, with divinity.
It's more focused on the concept. Back to our listener.
So a god made the Talos, not a human.
That's absolutely right. The source makes that very clear.
Yes, Hephaestus, the god of invention and technology.
So when we talk about life through craft or biotechny,
In the context of these myths, it's divine craft.
it highlights the ancient understanding that
Yep, go on.
Wow, so back in the ancient times, they believed that only divine beings would be able to create other divine beings.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
it does capture a core element of those early myths.
This idea that true creation, especially of lifelike beings,
Was something beyond human capability,
because those creations were often imbued with special power.
like Telos with his divine ichor.
Exactly. Humans could craft things, but imbuing them with that vital essence.
That seemed to be the exclusive domain of the divine,
It underscores the immense power attributed to the gods.
and perhaps a sense of humility about human limitations at the time. Oh, go for it.
So when did that change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
The source actually charts that shift for us.
It's a gradual move across those 3 ages we mentioned.
Think about it. In the age of myth and marvel,
The power of creation is firmly in the divine realm.
then you move into the Renaissance and Enlightenment,
And we see humans actually building these intricate automata.
like Da Vinci's Knight or the Jacquedro's androids.
They're not imbued with divine eye care, but they move.
It shows a growing confidence in human craft.
That we could replicate at least the appearance of life.
And the age of reason is crucial. Philosophers start to argue.
That maybe life and even thought aren't so mystical.
Hobbes saying reasoning is, but reckoning is a key turning point.
It suggests that the mechanisms of intelligence
Could potentially be understood and even replicated mechanically.
and those early calculating machines.
They were the first tangible steps.
Ah, yeah, uh-huh.
But wouldn't the ancient thought be that this knowledge or intelligence, there's a distinction between divine intelligence and knowledge and human knowledge and intelligence?
That's a really interesting nuance to consider.
Absolutely, that idea of different kinds of intelligence.
The source doesn't explicitly dive into a theological debate.
But it does highlight how the source of creation is perceived.
In the myths, as you pointed out, it's divine beings.
Imbued with their inherent wisdom and power.
Human intelligence, as it's understood and explored later,
Especially with the Enlightenment thinkers.
is framed more as a process of reasoning and calculation,
Almost a mechanical unfolding of logic.
so that the nature and origin of the intelligence differ greatly.
Divine knowledge perhaps seen as complete and innate.
Whereas human knowledge is acquired, learned, and often fallible.
That distinction you're drawing.
It really underscores the shift in perspective the source traces
From beings imbued with a divine spark.
to systems that mimic human cognitive abilities,
It's a move from a more spiritual or mystical understanding.
to a more mechanistic and computational one.
So with that important distinction in mind,
The source moves on to Pandora next.
often remembered for the box, but the source looks at her origin.
Oh, absolutely. Hesiod says she was crafted by Hephaestus meticulously,
As a punishment for mankind, she's called a kalos kakon, a beautiful evil.
like an early android or AI agent.
That's how the source interprets it. Lifelike, beautiful, but artificial.
Lacking
there
real
any-
emotions and designed with a specific destructive.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Are there any parts in the Chinese development of this indicating that they had divine beings making these divine automatons of sorts?
That's a really interesting question about the Chinese perspective.
The source doesn't explicitly mention divine beings crafting the Chinese automata.
The focus there seems to be more on human ingenuity and imperial power.
The story of Yanxi highlights the skill of the mechanical engineer.
And the imperial automata were often displays of wealth.
Hey, yeah, what's up?
So wouldn't that kind of lean towards the ancients in China having the understanding of kind of like our computation or mental computation in a way that our Western counterparts did, but not until the Enlightenment era?
That's a really thought-provoking observation.
It brings up a key point about how different cultures approached understanding intelligence.
The source does suggest that in ancient China, the focus was on the mechanical simulation.
Think of Yanxi's incredibly detailed automaton.
It impressed with its lifelike functionality.
Whereas in the West, especially with the Greek myths.
There was that strong connection to divine creation.
So maybe the Chinese tradition leaned more towards understanding the how of complex movement.
While the West grappled more with the who or what imbued life.
It's almost like different starting points for exploring similar ideas.
The source doesn't explicitly say they understood mental computation as we do.
But their ability to create such intricate mechanisms.
Definitely suggests a sophisticated understanding of complex systems.
And as you pointed out, the explicit focus on reason as calculation.
That really took hold in the West during the Enlightenment.
It's a fascinating difference in emphasis, isn't it?
Okay, so Pandora was designed with a specific, destructive, programmed mission.
Open that jar, unleash the miseries.
Wow, that's a dark take on early artificial creation.
But Hephaestus also made helpful things, like the golden handmaidens.
Right, from Homer's Iliad, described as being made of gold in the semblance of living maids.
They were self-moving assistants in his workshop.
And they weren't just simple automatons.
Homer says they had God's knowledge.
Yeah, they could speak, act strongly, even anticipate needs.
The source connects us directly to that fundamental human desire.
Automated servants to take away the drudgery. Aristotle even.
Oh yeah, go on.
So these handmaids had God's knowledge. How did they acquire God's knowledge?
That's a fantastic question to dig into.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
The source doesn't give a specific mechanism for how these golden handmaidens obtained God's knowledge.
It's more of a descriptive element within the myth itself.
Think of it within the context of divine creation.
Hephaestus, being a god of immense skill and power.
His creations would naturally reflect some aspect of that divine nature,
So God's knowledge could be seen as an inherent quality.
a part of their design and purpose imbued by their creator.
Almost like saying a modern program has its code.
In this ancient context, that code is divine knowledge.
It highlights the seemingly limitless capabilities attributed to the gods.
And maybe suggests a level of understanding beyond human comprehension at that time.
So while the how remains in the realm of myth,
What emphasizes the extraordinary nature of these artificial beings
it sets them apart from purely mechanical creation,
and links their capabilities to their divine origin.
which leads right into the idea of automated servants.
This desire to eliminate drudgery, as the source points out,
Aristotle later even pondered this very idea.
wondering if tools could work on their own.
So we see these different roles for artificial beings.
Guardian, punisher, and now servant with God's knowledge.
What's the big picture we should take from these Greek myths?
The source highlights a recurring theme.
When these artificial beings interact with humans,
The stories tend to take a turn for the worse,
there's this sense of caution woven into the narratives,
maybe suggesting inherent risks in creating beings with such power.
a very early form of considering unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Now, shifting away from. Oh, go for it.
But is it the case that, per the sources, only Western thoughts caution against explicitly the potential harm of these automatons or these artificial beings or the artificial intelligence as we see it today?
That's a really interesting question.
It makes you think about the nuances in these ancient stories.
While the Greek myths certainly have those cautionary elements,
Think of Talos being defeated and Pandora unleashing misery.
the source also highlights similar themes in the Jewish tradition,
The golem, created for good, often goes astray.
showing that even well-intentioned artificial beings can have unintended consequences.
So it's not exclusively a Western concern, according to the text.
The Chinese accounts, while focusing on ingenuity,
Like Yanshi's automaton surprising the king,
they perhaps emphasize the marvel and skill of creation.
rather than explicit warnings of danger.
But the very act of disassembly in Yanshi's tale,
Could be interpreted as a way to demystify something that seemed too real.
almost a subtle caution against blurring the lines too much.
It's a fascinating point about the different cultural lenses.
Okay, so moving on from Greece,
The source then delves into the golem of Prague,
a figure from Jewish folklore brought to life through mysticism.
clay animated by sacred ritual, not mechanics,
The concept of the golem itself is quite powerful.
signifying something incomplete yet full of potential.
The well-known story revolves around Rabbi Lowe,
Who fashioned the golem as a protector for Prague's Jewish community?
and the method of bringing it to life is key.
The placement of the Shem, a holy inscription.
So again, we see that protector archetype.
But that familiar thread of control, or lack thereof, appears.
It seems almost inherent in these early creation narratives.
The golem's immense strength often leads to problems.
It takes commands too literally, lacking true understanding.
And in the end, Rabbi Lou has to deactivate it.
By removing the Shem, returning it to inert clay,
It's a compelling allegory about the weight of creation.
and the possible pitfalls of trying to play that role.
And this fascination wasn't confined to the West.
Absolutely. Ancient China also had a rich history of automata,
Remember the detailed account of Yanshi's humanoid figure,
and the numerous other mechanical wonders in the imperial courts.
often serving as displays of artistry and the emperor's power.
So across these diverse ancient cultures,
We observe this gradual evolution in how they imagine these beings,
moving from divine origins toward human skill and invention,
setting the stage for the Renaissance,
and the tangible construction of intricate automata,
like Leonardo's robotic knight and the Jacquedro's androids,
truly demonstrating the growth in mechanical knowledge.
and inching us closer to the idea of minds and machines.
which then provides the groundwork for the Enlightenment thinkers.
Who started to examine the very essence of thought.
Ultimately,
Right now, what I'm doing is, for the one viewer here, I'm adding to this knowledge base. So I'm on Google Notebook LM, talking to it about the historical trajectory of artificial intelligence, how it was thought of back in the day, and how it's thought of now. By back in the day, I mean antiquity, like BC times, right? Um, and now I'm advancing that into modern thinking, trying to see connections and just get an understanding of the history of thought, history of ideas. So I'm adding now Aristotle's complete works, Plato's complete works. I'm going to do Socrates. I'm going to do the Confucius Analects, Tao Te Ching, and any other basic philosophical thought that made the foundations of what we have today. So now we're going to upload Plato up into that beast. We're going to up Plato up here. Now let's do Socrates. Let's see. Maybe I have a misunderstanding. It's not what I wanted. I want some fucking guy's take on him. Okay, maybe it's just Plato. I don't know. Now let me go here and look up who are the fundamental Western thinkers that shaped our modern world. So now I'm just using ChatGPT to do this. So Socrates, but I couldn't. So I thought, but whatever. Let's see if we can get all of Rene Descartes' work uploaded into this motherfucker. Looks like it. Let's just make sure. Yeah, I think so. So cool. Let's put this in. All right, cool. We're gonna go with ChatGPT for a second, and then we're gonna beef it up a little bit. Oh, come on. I can't do that one. This has to be all this work. Yeah. Okay. So we'll add that. We'll just keep adding until we can't add no more. Okay. Wow. If it lets me add in all this stuff, that's crazy. Because see, now I got Aristotle, Kant, Plato, Descartes. I got this. Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein? All right. um, damn, there's so much. But this is what we do. See if it works. Nope, that ain't it. Okay. Now we'll add in that. Try to re-upload this. Alright, I don't want to buy any of that shit. So we'll skip that guy. That work still ain't loaded. I don't know why. It still not be loading. Good old Charles Darwin. You're next. It's kind of whack. They don't have this all put together, but that's okay. So this is Charles Darwin. We got to go bit by bit. Bit by bit. Really beefing up that knowledge base, you know? Now we go to Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein. All right. We're just really beefing this thing up. Going all out. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I can't do anything from that site because I got to be a member. Don't want to be a member of their site? No, thank you, buddy. So now we're going to Augustine of Hippo. St. Augustine, for those who are unaware. City of God, Confessions. A couple other books, I think. I think Confessions is like his autobiography. He may have more. I don't know. Thomas Aquinas. He was a prolific writer. Okay. This is certainly not his complete works. It was too short. This is certainly Thomas Aquinas. We're talking 9,000 pages, baby. 9,000 pages. Okay. Okay. Now, let's see. Let's just go his books. Confessions. There we go. We need to also get the Eastern Orthodox thinkers up in this beast, though. We can't just forget them. City of God. City of God. Now let's do Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. Let's just see if we can get a complete works. I feel like we can. There we go. That can't be it either. Yeah, volume 14. Will to Power. I want all of it. Dog. I want all of it. All of it. All of it. This ain't it either. Come on. This, I mean, only a couple hundred pages. This dude wrote so much. All right, I guess I gotta do this individually. So here we go. Gotta go and get all of Nietzsche's books, put them up in this motherfucker. And then from there, I think we're just gonna go to Chinese thoughts. I don't know, because then we're probably not doing the West a great justice. There's just so many thinkers, so many books. Let me just see which one I just uploaded. Or no more being added. Oh no, right here, All Too Human. Dawn of Day, Birth of Tragedy. So we got Birth of Tragedy. So we can go to Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The book that everybody reads and thinks they know everything about. Nietzsche. Nietzsche. You know, a book I read several times from Nietzsche is The Antichrist. At the time, I enjoyed the way that he tore apart Paul. Saint Paul. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that anymore. I mean, I tend to align a lot with the Orthodox Church. That's what I need to become, is a Orthodox Christian. I've not officially become one yet, but that's the church I go to. Okay. This is going to take a minute. Now we got to go to John Stuart Mill. I gotta tell my wife to bring me up some food, because I haven't eaten. Bring me up food, woman. She might be my one viewer in here. Oh, not what I wanted. I don't want to do that twice. I don't want that twice. So I guess we gotta go over here. Get out of here. And download. Want to know load? Oh, that's whack. No. On Liberty. I have that book. I've read that book. Wow. That dude has a lot of books. A lot. He has a lot. All right. I gotta keep it going. 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 All right. Fuck. I don't know why. I just can't give me all the works. I don't want to fucking download all of his shit. Separately, that is. I don't know. We'll just put this in. It's comprehensive enough. Same thing. So many fucking books, complete works. All right. Let's just do Chinese thinkers now. Confucius. Confucius say, oh, is this all his books? Let's see, that can't be if it's 245 pages. And I didn't ask you to download it right away. That ain't what I wanted. This is not it. I have the actual book. I have his book. You cannot fool me that this is only 100 pages. This is it. 740 pages. Can't download it directly. I think maybe this one. Let's see. Not really, but I can do this. It's a cool thing. I can just copy a website and boom. Oh yeah, I know this guy. This boy here. But that ain't it, because that ain't by him. I want the book by him. This is a translation, but it is by him. It's probably going to be hard to find a lot of the Chinese works, if we're being honest. Yeah, it's going to be hard to find all the Chinese work, probably. Now let's just, in the meantime, let's go back to this thing here. Ba-boom. Ba-boom. And now let's ask it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Oh, hey, I think our listeners got something to say.
Oh, yeah, I do have something to say. Now tell me what Nietzsche would think about AI.
Oh, that's a fascinating question. It's not something he directly addressed, obviously, living when he did.
Right, no silicon chips or algorithms back then. But his ideas, about humanity, technology, and the future.
Exactly. We can definitely speculate, drawing from his core philosophies. What stands out to you as potentially relevant?
Well, his concept of the Übermensch, the overman, that idea of surpassing oneself, creating new values.
That's key. He was all about human potential, pushing beyond limitations, even self-imposed ones. Could AI fit into that vision?
Maybe as a tool, something that helps humanity evolve, overcome its weaknesses.
Or perhaps he'd see it as another potential form of nihilism, a distraction from genuine self-creation and affirmation of life.
He was pretty critical of things that could make us complacent or less connected to our earthly existence.
Remember his critique of Europe's flatland? He might see an over-reliance on AI as another form of that, a simplification of the complexities of being.
And his emphasis on the will to power, that fundamental drive for growth and mastery. How might AI intersect with that?
Would he see it as an extension of human will or as a potential competitor, even a threat to it?
Here's where it gets really interesting. He valued strength, independence, the embrace of hardship.
Could a life increasingly mediated by AI, perhaps making things too easy, be seen as a weakening of that spirit?
That's a strong possibility. He wasn't one for comfort's sake.
And what about his views on truth and perspective? He was very aware of how our viewpoints shape our reality.
Could AI, with its own forms of data processing and understanding, offer radically different perspectives? Would he welcome that challenge or be suspicious of it?
It raises an important question. Would he see AI as capable of genuine insight or just sophisticated mimicry?
Given his skepticism towards established systems of thought, he might be wary of uncritically accepting AI's pronouncements as truth.
But then again, Nietzsche also admired strength and innovation. If AI demonstrated a truly novel form of intelligence,
He might find that compelling, even if unsettling. It's tough to say definitively, but it's certainly fertile ground for thought, filtered through his unique lens.
absolutely. Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
All right, now give me the view Thomas Aquinas would have taken.
Ah, fascinating shift in perspective. Aquinas, living in a very different era, would approach this through his theological and philosophical framework.
Right, a world far removed from silicon and code. So, where would he even begin with something like AI?
His focus was heavily on God as the ultimate intelligence and creator. He believed all other forms of intellect were derived from and subordinate to this divine mind.
Okay, so would he see AI as a kind of imitation, a pale reflection of God's creation?
Possibly, he might analyze it in terms of its purpose. For Aquinas, everything had a telos, an inherent end or goal given by God.
So, what would be the purpose of artificial intelligence in his view?
That's where it gets interesting. If AI serves to better understand God's creation or to improve human life in a way that aligns with divine law, he might see a potential good in it.
But what about the idea of creating something that could potentially think or even act independently? Would that raise any red flags?
It could. Aquinas had a clear understanding of the hierarchy of being, with humans occupying a unique place due to their rational soul, created in God's image.
So, the idea of artificial intelligence potentially blurring those lines.
That might be a concern. He emphasized the importance of human reason and free will as gifts from God. An independent artificial intellect could perhaps challenge that view.
And his views on the nature of knowledge. He believed true knowledge ultimately led to a better understanding of God.
Exactly. If AI were to generate knowledge, Aquinas might evaluate its truthfulness and its ultimate direction. Would it lead towards or away from a divine understanding?
It sounds like he'd approach it with a blend of curiosity and caution, always grounding it in his theological framework.
Precisely. He would likely see the development of AI as another example of human ingenuity, but one that needs to be carefully considered in light of its potential impact on humanity's relationship with God and the natural order.
So, moving forward with our timeline, this connects to the long human fascination.
Indeed. This desire to create and understand intelligence, whether viewed through a theological or technological lens, remains a constant thread.
Okay, let's bring it back to our planned discussion a little. We were just finishing up with the christening moment of AI as a field.
Yes, that 1956 Dartmouth workshop. So the source emphasizes the name itself, artificial intelligence, and this idea of a great divorce from cybernetics.
This is a really interesting point. McCarthy coined artificial intelligence specifically for the proposal. It wasn't an accident, it was strategic.
Why? What was he distancing it from?
From the field of cybernetics led by Norbert Wiener, cybernetics was already established, broader, looking at control and communication in animals and machines, feedback loops, often with an analog focus.
And McCarthy wanted a sharper focus.
He felt cybernetics wasn't quite hitting the mark he envisioned. He wanted to rally people around the potential of the digital computer, symbolic reasoning, logic, programming.
The source suggests he consciously chose the name to create a distinct territory, maybe even avoid Wiener's influence.
So it created a split.
A significant one, especially in the US. AI largely went down the path of symbolic processing, logic, expert systems, what we now call GoFi, good old-fashioned AI.
Cybernetics explored different paths, like self-organization, emergence, more bottom-up approaches.
It set up this internal tension in the field between symbolic and later connectionist approaches.
And the name artificial intelligence itself had consequences.
Huge consequences. Framing the goal explicitly as replicating intelligence inevitably invited comparisons to human intelligence.
This anthropocentric focus shaped everything. Public perception, funding cycles, and the ongoing ethical and philosophical debates.
That name, chosen partly for academic real estate, really locked the field into a human centric paradigm.
So looking back across this whole vast sweep, the source covers, from the ichor in Talos's veins to the algorithms in modern neural nets.
It really does feel like an unbroken thread, doesn't it? It suggests the story isn't just about inventing machines.
It's about a persistent human impulse to understand and replicate intelligence, using whatever tools and concepts were available in each era.
Myth, craft, philosophy, math, computation.
Starting in myth and marvel with biotechny, imagining artificial life but immediately grappling with control and peril.
Talus's bolt, the golem's rampage.
Then shifting in the age of reason, focusing less on life itself and more on mechanizing thought.
You get Hobbes saying reasoning is reckoning, and the calculating engines proving part of that was possible.
And finally, the age of formalism, where it becomes a science. Turing, McCulloch, and Pitts provide the theoretical tools.
And Dartmouth gives it a name and a mission. And as we've discussed through both Nietzsche and Aquinas, those fundamental questions remain.
They do. About control, consciousness, the nature of thought, our relationship with our creations.
They haven't disappeared, they're just being rephrased now in the language of computation and AI.
Exactly. This whole history, it's not just about the quest to build intelligent machines.
It's also been a mirror, constantly reflecting back on us our own evolving understanding of what it even means to be human.
To be intelligent, to be alive.
That's definitely something to cheer on, this long view. How does knowing this history change how you think about AI unfolding today?
It really does provide a valuable perspective, doesn't it? It shows us that our hopes and fears around AI aren't entirely new.
They echo across millennia of human thought and imagination. And with that, we've reached the end of our exploration today. Thanks for joining us and for those insightful questions.
Absolutely. It's always great to hear from you. We hope you enjoyed this historical journey. Until next time.
These aren't going to download in here, are they? It's kind of wet. There's just so many writings here. What if I can do this though? Copy the link. Does that work? We'll see. Nope. Damn, son. There's just so many of them. I'm trying to put the church fathers in here. All of them. Hmm. Man, we have so many things in here now. All right, so I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it do the same thing, but for the Eastern Church. We'll see how good it does. Eastern Catholic Story. Eastern Orthodoxy. Christianity. All right, so I guess we'll see how that works. I'm having a Gemini do that, do that, do that, do that.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
What will be the Chinese perspective now, given the historical and philosophical context I've given you with Confucius and other Chinese literature of AI?
Oh, that's a wonderful question and so relevant to everything we've been discussing. You're right to bring in the rich Chinese intellectual tradition.
Absolutely. We've touched on some of the foundational ideas, but let's delve a bit deeper into how that might shape a Chinese perspective on AI.
Considering the palimpsest idea our source talks about, those early philosophical debates are still resonating.
Think about Confucianism, with its emphasis on social harmony, hierarchy, and the importance of ethics in governance.
That could translate to a focus on AI that serves the collective good and maintains social order, perhaps with a stronger emphasis on state guidance.
And then you have Taoism, with its emphasis on naturalness, spontaneity, and the interconnectedness of things.
That might lead to different approaches to AI development, perhaps more focused on bio inspired or less rigidly structured systems.
Our source also highlights the legalist school, which valued efficiency, pragmatism, and the rule of law.
That could certainly influence how AI is implemented in areas like law enforcement and governance, prioritizing practical results.
What's fascinating is how these different schools of thought weren't necessarily exclusive, but often synthesized.
Exactly. The Han Dynasty's adoption of Confucianism, as our source explains, incorporated elements of legalism as well.
So, a Chinese perspective on AI might be a unique blend of these traditions.
Perhaps a focus on ethical AI development rooted in Confucian values, combined with a pragmatic, state guided approach influenced by legalism, and maybe even elements of Taoist philosophy in the underlying design principles.
And we can't forget the impact of Buddhism, which our source notes brought in sophisticated metaphysical questions.
That history of absorbing and transforming foreign ideas suggests a similar dynamic could play out with AI.
It might not be a simple adoption of Western models, but a synicization of AI, adapting it to fit existing cultural and philosophical frameworks.
This long view really underscores that technology isn't developed in a vacuum. Cultural values and historical context profoundly shape its trajectory.
So while it's tough to give a definitive answer, understanding this rich intellectual history provides a crucial lens for considering how AI might be approached and developed in China.
It adds another fascinating layer to the story, showing that the human relationship with intelligence, artificial or otherwise, is deeply intertwined with our philosophical traditions.
Absolutely. It's always great to hear your thoughts and questions, prompting us to explore these connections further.
We hope this gives you some food for thought on the potential Chinese perspective. Thanks again for tuning in.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insightful contributions. Until next time. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
How does Charles Darwin's Origins of Species, the theory of evolution, affect the or influence the thought in Western society when it comes to artificial intelligence?
Oh, that's a really insightful question, and it touches on some fundamental shifts in Western thought.
Absolutely. Darwin's work, particularly on the origin of species, had a profound impact on how we understand life and intelligence.
It really challenged the prevailing views of divinely created and static species, introducing the idea of gradual change and natural selection.
And this had ripple effects far beyond biology. It influenced philosophy, sociology, and eventually the way we think about the possibility of artificial intelligence.
In what ways specifically do you see that influence?
Well, Darwin's theory provided a framework for understanding how complex systems, like living organisms and their intelligence, could arise from simpler beginnings without direct intervention.
So instead of a sudden creation of intelligence, it suggests a gradual, iterative process.
Precisely. This idea of emergent complexity through incremental change became a powerful concept that later informed some approaches to AI.
You can see parallels in machine learning, where systems learn and improve through repeated exposure to. Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
But does Charles Darwin cover consciousness at all?
That's a very important question to clarify. While On the Origin of Species revolutionized our understanding of life's development,
It primarily focused on the mechanisms of natural selection and the diversification of species.
consciousness, as we understand its subjective experience, self awareness wasn't a central theme in that particular work.
However, Darwin did touch upon mental faculties in later works, didn't he?
You're right. In The Descent of Man, published later, he explored the evolution of mental abilities in humans and animals.
So, while Origins laid the groundwork for understanding the evolution of complex systems,
The specific question of consciousness was addressed more directly in his subsequent writings.
it's crucial to make that distinction when we're thinking about Darwin's impact on AI.
Absolutely. The idea of gradual development and adaptation is key, as we were saying.
How complex systems can arise from simpler ones through iterative processes, much like in machine learning.
The concepts of struggle for existence and survival of the fittest also offered a way to think about.
How competition and environmental pressures. Oh, yeah, go on.
Okay, what was Darwin's thoughts on races, like human races?
That's a really important and complex question. Darwin did address the topic of human races in The Descent of Man.
Yes, and it's crucial to understand his views within the context of the 19th century and the prevailing scientific ideas of the time.
He essentially argued against the idea that human races were distinct species. He viewed them as varieties of a single species.
As our source from The Descent of Man mentions, he discusses arguments for and against ranking so-called races of man as distinct species.
He noted the many points of resemblance between even the most distinct races in both body and mind.
He also considered how these races were distributed across the world.
However, it's important to acknowledge that his work also contains ideas that are now considered scientifically inaccurate and ethically problematic by today's standards.
Absolutely. While he argued against distinct species, he did explore the concept of differences between groups of people.
As the source notes, he considered whether these differences were constant and what their physiological importance might be.
He even touches on the idea of sexual selection, potentially playing a role in differentiating the races of man, as mentioned in the introduction of The Descent of Man.
It's a nuanced and at times uncomfortable part of his work, reflecting the scientific understanding and societal biases of his era.
So while he laid the groundwork for understanding human evolution, his views on race are something we need to examine.
Hey, yeah, what's up?
So, how could we infer the advancement of Western world or the global society at that with the age of AI, considering all of the philosophical thinkers and spiritual thinkers that make the foundation for the ethics, politics, and society at large for both East and West?
That's a really profound question, and it gets to the heart of why understanding this history is so important as we move into the age of AI.
Absolutely. When we look at the sweep of philosophical and spiritual thought, both East and West, it really lays the groundwork for how societies grapple with new technologies and ideas.
Think back to our discussion about the ancient myths, the creation of the golem or Tabos. Those stories explored the ethics of creation, the potential for unintended consequences.
Right, these aren't just old males. They're the first attempts to wrestle with the very issues we're facing with advanced AI today: control, autonomy, the nature of beings made, not born.
And then you have the philosophical shifts of the Enlightenment, as our sources discussed, moving from animating life to replicating thought. This fundamentally changed the goal and our approach.
That mechanization of the mind, as the text put it, paved a way for the computational models that underpin much of modern AI. but it also brought in questions about what truly constitutes intelligence and consciousness.
When we consider thinkers like Nietzsche with his ideas of the Übermensch and the will to power, we can speculate how AI might be seen as either a tool for human advancement or a potential threat to our self overcoming.
And Aquinas, with his theological framework, reminds us to consider the purpose and ethical implications of AI in relation to a broader understanding of creation and our place within it.
Your point about both Eastern and Western thought is crucial. The emphasis on harmony and social order in Confucianism, for instance, might lead to very different societal integrations of AI compared to Western individualistic approaches.
Exactly. The spiritual underpinnings, the core values of a society, deeply influence how it shapes and is shaped by technological advancements like AI. It's not just a technological evolution, it's a socio-philosophical one.
So, inferring the advancement of global society in the age of AI requires us to look beyond just the algorithms and consider this deep history of how humanity has thought about intelligence, creation, and our own nature.
It's about understanding the unbroken thread, as our source calls it, from ancient myths to modern code.
Oh, yeah, uh huh.
So, give me a concise overview of the development of history of ideas from east to west. I want it to be concise. I wanted to encapsulate the main,
Oh, go for it.
and it must encapsulate the main ideas from both.
Okay, let's try to give you that concise overview, encapsulating the main ideas from both East and West.
Starting in the East, especially China, as some of our sources touch on, you see early emphasis on societal harmony and ethical governance with Confucianism.
Alongside that, Taoism stressed living in accordance with nature and interconnectedness, while legalism focused on practical and efficient rule.
These core ideas intermingled and evolved over centuries, deeply influencing Eastern thought on ethics, society, and governance.
In the West, ancient Greece laid a foundation with philosophy emphasizing reason, logic, and ethics explored by figures like Plato.
This evolved through Roman thought and the rise of Christianity, which introduced a significant theological framework that shaped much of Western philosophy.
The Renaissance brought a renewed interest in classical learning and human potential, leading to the Enlightenment's focus on reason, individualism, and scientific inquiry.
Both East and West also developed rich spiritual traditions that shaped their values and ethical systems, impacting their approaches to knowledge and society.
So, in essence, you have long traditions in both hemispheres grappling with fundamental questions of ethics, governance, and the nature of reality, albeit with distinct emphases in evolution.
Precisely. Now, going back to our discussion about Darwin,
Yes, while his specific views on race are a separate issue with problematic elements.
the broader concept of gradual development and adaptation that his Origins of Species presented is key to understanding its impact on AI thinking.
And as we were about to mention, his later work, The Descent of Man, did begin to explore the evolution of mental capacities in living beings.
This really underscores how our understanding of intelligence in the natural world profoundly influences our attempts to create it artificially.
It certainly does. Darwin's work provided a powerful new way of thinking about how
What were you
complex
making?
systems, including intelligence,
What?
could arise over time.
And that brings us to the end of our exploration for today. Thank you so much for your insightful questions and for joining us.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to delve into these topics with you. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. Until our next stream.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna bring me up like a potato on the meat. It's okay.
You don't really like that sausage.
No, it's okay. I figured that's why I didn't bring it up now that I'm thinking about it. It's whatever. No, you don't need to apologize. Thank you.
I'll bring you up some cookies when they're done if you want.
Sure. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, huh? I think I'm done. I'm done for now. So that's what we did for AI. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Yeah. All right. Deuces.